to all the Facebook members. We are here and we have a guest on the panel. We have Louise Dunaway, who has written a book. And we're going to learn a little bit more about what the book is about and a little bit of background. We did have a conversation with Louise last week on the other Facebook group. This is the Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Presence group that we are doing this live feed on. And welcome, Louise. An honor
Hi,
and a privilege. Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. I brought, this is the book.
It's beautiful.
I brought it this time. The picture is actually a stock photo, but it's so funny because when I showed the kids, Olivia, the 7-year-old, goes, "Is that us? When did we take that picture? It looks just like us." And it's just the stock photo.
Did you want to say something more about the book, Louise? I know you said it was about grandparents raising grandchildren, but
Yeah,
you were just saying it's not so much as about resources that grandparents need, but more of a inner work, inner journey, which is what our group is about, right? Because it's about
right.
Eckhart's work and applying Eckhart's work day to day so that we transform ourselves. And as he says, as we transform, the universe around us transforms as well, right?
Exactly,
So,
yes. And I think, well, first of all, the book is mainly based on everything I've learned from Eckhart, all his teachings. You know, I've read his books. I was in the 6-month course, and I've done other courses that he offers, like on his website. So it's all kind of ingrained in me. And I think when I reread it after it was published, I could tell it was a lot of what I've learned from him. You know, there's other spiritual leaders that I learned from, like Wayne Dyer. A lot of his stuff's ingrained in me as well. And but when you read it, it kind of, you know, it reminds you of Eckhart's work because it's in me, you know, and that's what I've learned. And that's actually, I would probably say the number one thing that helped, you know, when you're dealing with your daughter or your son that goes astray and, you know, chooses the path of drugs, it's very hard on the heart. And you can, you know, there's always choices on how you can handle it. And, you know, at first I didn't handle it well. I was, you know, very anxious. I was constantly angry. I had, you know, I was like, every time the phone rang, I would jump because I thought it was something bad was going to happen. I was constantly thinking in the future, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? The kids are not going to be safe. Or thinking in the past, you know, I should have said this, or I should have done that, or maybe I could have helped her in this way or that way. And you can make yourself crazy just with the internal dialogue going. And, you know, I had been doing this work for 20, 30 years, but it wasn't until what I call in the book when I hit my rock bottom, when I just couldn't suffer. I just decided I cannot suffer any longer. Like, I have to change. And one thing led to another. And, a lot of it had to do with, you know, what Eckhart teaches about being silent and present. And the more presence I brought into my life, the more things on the outside changed. And it didn't change where my daughter is clean and, you know, part of our family right now, but it changed my perception and my inner feelings and thoughts. And by changing the inner, everything on the outer changed for the best. And, you know, the grandkids ended up, you know, coming and being with me, and we had them for about a year. We went through all the court systems. So the parents, the bio parents, my daughter and the father lost their parental, they had opportunity after opportunity. The courts are very, very forgiving and very considerate of bio parents. So they gave them a lot of opportunities. Like they had phone calls that were being monitored by CPS, Child Protective Services, and they missed, I think it was 11 out of 13. And they just, couldn't get it together. They would miss their drug tests. They'd miss the meetings with the courts. And finally, they lost their parental rights. And we had the opportunity then to adopt them. And so we adopted them. And, now it's just dealing with all the trauma that they have and working through that. But even by me doing this work, it helps them, because then I help them to do that. Like, like we have a time every day where we journal. I do my own work in the morning before I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and they usually get up about 6. So I do like my spiritual work in the morning. But then throughout the day, I'll say, okay, let's sit down and journal. And sometimes I'll give them a topic like, let's talk. Tell me how you're feeling about COVID. And they'll, give them kind of a prompt and they'll write, or I'll just let them, whatever their feelings are. And then I do tapping with them. And every night they love meditation that Wayne Dyer has out there. And it's, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's where he read a book, and I can't remember the author's name, but this person figured out the sounds of God and put them into music. So it's sounds and music put together, and so they listen to that every night before they go to bed. And so I feel like my work has helped them in a lot of ways.
They must have done something right where they have a awakened grandmother. And you don't look like a grandmother. You're pretty young, so they're fortunate to have you, because grandparents are not even at, like if you look at most grandparents, they may have so many health issues that they may not be able to take care. So look at the grace and the fact that you have your health and you're
That's
full of vitality and energy that you can keep up. Like if you ask me now to take care of a 2-month-old or a year-old child, I probably couldn't. I couldn't stay up all throughout the night. All that wouldn't happen anymore, which I used to, like
right.
when my son was born.
And I honestly feel like, like I honestly, like if you were to ask me, I'd probably say the same thing. It's very tiring. It's really hard. But somehow, like I do feel it's like from doing all this inner work that, it just happens. Like if you looked at my schedule, like if you looked at my day timer, like every day is like one thing after another, it's packed. And when I look at that, like as a human, my form, I feel like there's just no way I could do all that. Like it's impossible. But yeah, I have, it's like even just with the book, like, I don't know how I wrote this book when I had, the baby. He was born 2 pounds, 6 weeks early, drug induced. He had meth, heroin, and 2 prescription drugs with, in him when he was born. And he was, having withdrawals. Like if I looked at that, I would say there's no way I could do that. But it's like there's just this force within me that just does things. And I do believe it's because of the amount of time that I take to be centered and grounded. And like we hear all the time, like you can't give with the from an empty cup, or you can't give from a half, from half empty or whatever. But and so I feel like by doing that spiritual work, I fill myself up, and then I'm able to give and not leave myself out of the equation either, which is something that is another thing, when you're going 24/7, it's hard. you got to, stop and remember, like, you have to take care of yourself and you have to fill up your cup so that you're able to give without falling apart.
Thank you for sharing that, Louise. Eileen, do we have Donna? Donna wanted to ask a question. I don't know if we need to tag her.
I invited her because I'm friends with her, and I also tagged, and I haven't seen her yet. Is she in this group?
Yes, the power of presence. And nobody is asking any questions
Don't see her yet. No, just a lot of hellos so far.
Okay.
Christina's here.
Hello, Christina.
And Sandra's here, but she's having issues with, I believe
Good evening,
it was
Sandra. Hello.
her connection. And George is here.
Good evening, George.
And Lakshmi is here.
Lakshmi surely has questions. Good evening, Lakshmi. Thank you for joining, everyone.
And Samar is also here, but she's having trouble with her audio.
Okay. Thank you, Samar. Thank you for joining. Good evening. One of the things I saw on the Facebook
Sujata's here
group.
too.
Who is it?
Sujata.
Sujata. Okay. Good evening, Sujata. Hello. So one of the things I saw on the Facebook group, I think I saw a couple of posts on, they said, I'm living with a narcissist, or I'm living with, or they separated from a partner that was narcissist.
I
right?
saw something like that. Yeah, I didn't read the whole thing, but I remember seeing parts of that.
Exactly. So I was like, I cannot read the whole thing to grasp all the issues, but I did see the post that they were talking about. Do you remember them, Eileen? The narcissist post? So one of the things, there were a couple. So it seems like what I saw, thank you, Eileen. What I saw was in the past 3-4 days, there's been a post after post about a partner being narcissist, or I don't know if the family is toxic, or the whatever they label, they were living with a partner that is narcissist. The one thing I would say is, when we are in presence, labeling someone, and if you look at chapter, I think it's chapter 2 or chapter 3 of A New Earth, calling somebody a jerk, calling somebody a narcissist, calling somebody toxic, calling somebody whatever label you may give them, is the ego. The ego in us is putting another person down with that B word, or calling somebody a narcissist. So first, drop the label. I would say drop the label narcissist, right? That's what Eckhart would say. Build your presence power so that you are not drawn. So what Eckhart says, and this is the pointer to law of attraction or conscious manifestation, we attract according to our inner state. So why do you have toxic people in your life? What is in your inner state that is causing you the toxic people? So the toxicity is within you, right? And that within you toxicity is the pain body. So we have not gotten rid of our pain body, right? That is one toxicity. And then on top of that, we have all these resentments and grievances, hurt feelings, whatever negativity we have. And now think of the larger, so this is the microcosm of who we are. Then look at the macro. Macro, the planet is full of a pandemic, fear, anxiety, sadness, because people are losing their family members, and hundreds of thousands of people are dying, right? So that's, look at the collective. And one of the discussions we are going to have in the group meditation is, where do thoughts come from? And what Eckhart says is there's a collective mind. So we are attracting with our pain body, we are actually attracting this negativity towards us, right? And then we are saying that person is a narcissist. I don't want to live with that person. It's a narcissist. But we didn't look at ourselves. We didn't say, hey, I may be a narcissist, right? I may have that negativity, that horrible dark energy of a heavy, heavy pain body. I may be holding on to grievances, resentment, hatred towards our parents. Like our parents may have been unconscious. So there's like deep rooted hatred for the parents. Now you have that toxicity, and then you're saying everybody else around you is toxic. So first, build a presence practice. There's a topic that I've written up called intensifying presence. In that topic is information like general guidelines. So Eckhart does not have a prescriptive guideline. This is how you do presence practice. Just pick up what gravitates towards your soul, gravitates towards some kind of presence practice, whether it's breath work, communing with nature, meditation, inner body work. I've seen people during the group meditation have gravitated towards their own presence practice, right? Eileen, you have your own, she's developed her own presence practice. So as you keep trying, you develop your own daily practice and then see, do these toxic people stay around you? You will attract only precious kindness and compassion. That's what you're going to attract. You want to say something about it, Louise? And I'm going to look at the chat real quick. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, I would like to say that, like, there is the other part to that is, you know, that, like, I'll just give an example. Say you meet someone, you know, you guys get married, you have kids, and you're unconscious the whole time, you know, you haven't ever, you know, meditated or anything. And then one person decides to do the inner work. And then all of a sudden you realize I'm in this toxic relationship, or I'm in this toxic family or whatever, you know, because after you start to, you know, do your own work, then, you know, so I don't know that you maybe always attract it. I think that's true to a big extent, but I think that a lot of times, you know, I know several people actually in that situation where they were both very toxic, and then one person decides to, you know, change and do all this work on themselves, and then they're like, all of a sudden my partner is unconscious and I'm not, you know what I mean? So there's that part that just popped into my head when you were saying that. But I do believe that what we think about and what we speak and how we speak and the people we're around, like, it does come around and comes back to you. The other part I do, and I kind of wanted your input on this, is how do you describe something? Like, I understand when you use, like, you know, jerk or words like that, but when you're trying to describe something or a situation you're in, like, how do you drop that label when you're trying to describe it? Like, if I wanted to say I'm in a narcissistic relationship, what would be another way of saying that?
The non-polarized word that Eckhart uses is unconscious. That person does not know what
Oh,
they
I see
are,
what you're
right?
saying.
They're
Okay.
just they're just acting out their conditioned patterns because they learned from somebody to be narcissistic, right?
Okay.
So they're just unconscious of what they're doing. But
Yeah.
the moment we label the person as narcissist, our ego stepped in, mind energy got created, and mind energy always creates polarity.
Yeah.
So if we created the positive of calling them narcissist, the negative is also that we will get attacked by the narcissist also is created because we are resisting. We're
Yeah.
not allowing the spaciousness. So one of the things is with group meditation, the people that are part of this Facebook group come from all walks of life, are at varying levels of consciousness. So group meditation is a great practice of offering that spaciousness from
Yes.
presence, because you don't know if attendee one is as presence holding presence as much as attendee 22, right?
Right.
So are you resisting this person? And then, Eckhart has this, he quotes Ramdas in A New Earth, where he says, if you want to know how awakened you are, just go back and stay with your parents, right?
Yes.
That'll show you how awakened you are, because your parents are a great signal that,
Yeah.
because a lot of people hold a lot of resentment towards their father or mother, because probably if your parents were in the 20th century, then they were pretty unconscious, because Eckhart's parents were unconscious, right? So he says anybody in that generation is pretty unconscious. So we have some, I'm going to go to the question. I'm going to give you your appreciation first, Louise. Lakshmi says, I agree, Poonam. They're very fortunate to have Louise. So your grandchildren are very fortunate to have you. You're not only helping your grandchildren, but you are helping so many similar vibratory souls. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Then the question from Trish is, do I always have to rise up to this situation? I'll let you answer, and then I'll answer. I'll take a pause.
Okay.
Do I always have to rise up to situations?
Well, I don't know if that's the correct word, but I know that, I just think that it comes naturally when you are like when I'm in a situation where I start to find myself wanting to react or wanting to judge or wanting to, think something negative. I bring myself back to being present, and then it kind of like dissolves. So then there's no friction or anything that you have to rise above. It's just kind of goes away. It's not a problem anymore. So that's kind of what I do when I'm in situations. I usually will just bring myself back to being present. And once I do, I realize that it's not as big as I thought in my head, or it's not as something that I have to really do anything about. I don't know if that answered it, but that's kind of what came to me.
I think that is pretty much the answer. Thank you, Louise, because we don't rise to any situation. We actually allow it. If we are in presence, it's back to the whole group meditation and the varying levels of consciousness. We have to sit back in our awareness and just allow it to be as it is. Like if a challenging situation is arising, the first step is, one of the memes says, the problem or the solution to the problem is when you merge with this challenge. I don't exactly remember the exact quote, but he says merge. What is that merging? That merging is our presence flowing into the solution. So if we didn't surrender, we didn't sit back and become loose in our body, become gentle and tender and soft, the softness didn't come, right? If you're resisting, then more of the challenge will arise. So the softness is, you don't have to rise to the situation. You have to merge with it. You have to allow the problem to bring you the solution as well. And that only happens if presence is flowing into the solution, right? So the presence practice will help you. Eileen, can I tell them about your waking up at 3:40 in the morning? So
Yes.
Eileen on Tuesday morning woke up at 3:40 in the morning, and the merging with that, and she was worried, right? Her husband didn't come home. So the merging with the solution is she sat in meditation from 3:40 until the next 80 minutes or so. You fell asleep after that? You did. Okay. So planetary intelligence is telling Eileen at that moment, it's not planetary, our inner being is not saying, hey, wake up, human being, and go worry about that. Planetary intelligence is just pouring out unconditional love, right? That is what alignment with inner beingness is. So 3:40 in the morning, if we are worrying, then we need to just get back in alignment and get into that state of unconditional love. And then you get some sleep, and then you're able, the meditation itself is very therapeutic. Like, even though you don't have sleep, it still will give you restfulness, and that's what sleep is giving us restfulness. I remember taking care of one of my best friends. She had a tibia plateau injury, and I had to take care of her the first day after her operation. I was the person that stayed all night with her. And you really can, in a hospital room, in that narrow bed, you cannot sleep, right?
Right.
So all I did was I put on my sacred acoustics meditation, and I would just meditate. And if she got up, and she would get up, like when the anesthesia gets out of the body, then the throbbing pain starts, right? She has metal plates in her leg. So I just like gently, like very softly, like I couldn't touch it with any pressure. I would rub it, and she said even that helped. It helped her like take her mind off the pain. So nobody's saying that we have to really go sleep. When we say we want to go sleep, it doesn't mean we have to go sleep. So that's how you merge, right? That's a perfect practical example of merging with the situation instead of resisting. What if you would have resisted and said, called 50 people, call the police, and your
It was
husband would have.
going. It was bad for like the first 20 minutes, but I got it
Right?
under control.
Okay, let's see if there are more questions. Sujata says, Eckhart mentions three states of ego: wanting, thwarted wanting, and indifference. Can we discuss an example? Thanks. You want to say something about wanting, thwarted wanting, and indifference?
Well, wanting, like, to me, that's not being present. When you're present, for me anyway, when I'm present, I don't feel like I need or want anything. Like, I'm just grateful and happy and content with that moment. And I think, you know, even going through this experience, that's really kind of like why I have come back to just being grateful and happy with what's going on now, here and now, instead of because for a large time, you know, big period of time, I was like, you know, I want my daughter to be clean, I want my family to be intact, I want my grandchildren to have their mother, I want. And you know, the more and more I practice presence, the less and less. It's not that I don't want her in the family and I don't want to clean. It's just that, you know, I've separated myself. Like, she has her path, I have mine. And I guess it's gotten to the point where I don't really feel like I want anything. I don't know if that seems strange, but I'm just, you know, taking each day, each time as it comes. And I think that a lot of times what came to my mind right now about indifference is, you know, because I'm in this situation and there, you know, I belong to support groups and stuff, that it can come across as being indifferent when you separate yourself and you detach from the situation, because a lot of moms are like, you know, still trying to help their addict, or they're still trying to make things the way they want it to be, or they still want and these things in their lives and their family and all of this stuff. And so they don't surrender completely or let go, you know, because they still want to control the outcome. And I have just gotten to be comfortable with whatever the outcome is, then so be it, you know, like, and it can come across as being indifferent, but it's not. It's more of just accepting what is and not really being so concerned with what the outcome will be.
Thank you, Louise. What I would say about wanting, and I used to, you know, like they say, or Eckhart says, that every human being comes from a sense of lack and incompleteness. So I remember, and this is very true for young children. So anybody that has young children, watch out for their ego, because the ego is wanting, in the state of wanting, right? So that's why you have a kid that may end up, or even like 18, 19-year-old children, right? That's when the ego is very, like the teenage years are where it is very, very obvious that it's there. And if we are doing Eckhart's work, it is all the more the ego, the wanting part is like, if they say something out of their mouth that I want ice cream right now, they want that ice cream, right? That wanting starts. I know I used to have like a horrible habit of buying things, but not so much as buying things for myself. I would buy it for the rest of the world, like my uh, son's aunt, his cousins. I would buy a lot of stuff. I loved giving away stuff, right? Even cooking, like I would cook large quantities of food and give it away. So there was the generosity in it, but there's also the buying and the, so I see the wanting, like fulfilling myself with I want. And like if my son, when he was born, like he had like maybe 30 pairs of clothes, and a baby doesn't need 30 pairs of clothes because it's little, and within 2 months he's going to grow bigger, so those 30 pairs are a waste. So one of my coworkers explained that to me. You can just go to Target and buy clothes for a small baby. You don't need to go to uh, get Tommy Hilfiger or all those designer brands, right? That's wanting. So I hope we answered wanting. Then the thwarted wanting is, especially for a teenager, and Eckhart has it on his video. If you look at chapter, wherever this is, chapter 2 or 3, a teenager calls in and Eckhart asks her, do you know what thwarted wanting is? It's like when you tell the child, no, you will not have that lollipop, and in Target or Walmart, they're having a horrible tantrum, right? They're throwing themselves on the floor and having this horrible tantrum. That is the thwarted wanting, because the immediate gratification is not there. You're not just giving. A lot of parents just give in and immediately give the child
What
whatever
they
they need, right?
want.
So thwarted wanting is when you're denying the person what they want, and then they throw a tantrum because of it, right? That's thwarted wanting. Indifference is something that I actually learned from Oprah's interview with Elie Wiesel. If I'm saying his name correctly, Elie Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz. And he said what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. He said something like, hatred is not the opposite of love, it's indifference. that the whole planet was indifferent to the atrocities that were happening. And since we had a Black Lives Matter movement and something happened to a African American person, right? So my thing is how indifferent were all the people around? Like somebody was photographing this person, somebody was, there were 2 or 3 more policemen watching, right? So how much indifference? So look what the ego did. What did the ego in a minute create, right? The passing away of a life, which could, if they were in presence, if they had some presence practice, right? If they were following Eckhart Tolle, that incident wouldn't have happened. So Samar says, yes, I agree. Back to pointing one finger and 3-point back, right? 3-point back. Rick says, yes, the ego in me sees the ego in another. That is the truth of this life situation. That is powerful awareness. The fact that we recognize our ego is in itself the beginning of presence flowing through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if what Eckhart says is, if we were in our ego completely overtaken by the ego, we wouldn't even recognize that there is something called ego or that identified mind existed, right?
Well,
Sujata,
I
I
know
hope,
that's exactly how I was. You know, when I was wrapped up in all that mind stuff, I had no idea. I was totally unaware.
so I have a question for you, Luis. You remember that story about the Zen master Hakuin, who he said, is that so? He was
Yeah, I
accused
just
of
said that story today.
have a baby and this thing.
Yeah, because
So
I had a friend.
tell me this. What would happen if your daughter got well and she said, now I want my children back, right?
Right.
Would you be able to say, is that so, and give the child back? Give the 3 children back. I mean, she's healed, like completely healed. She's a functioning adult. No, like she's completely healed from her addiction. She's a healed human being, right? So there's
Right.
no, I mean, and she has a job. She has a job that'll support the 3 kids and everything is fine. Will you be able, so you have to get to that point, and this will be our journey together, that you get to the point that you are able to say, is that so, and let go. You know, Maya Angelou says something, I can love you so much that I can let you go,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I love you 3 kids so much that even letting go of the 3 of you is okay with me, because I know what I did. You know, like Sujata was saying on the group meditation, do we really have to do things by saying, I want the fruit of the action? No. We just offer that the love that you're pouring into them for that moment is that moment's love. The next moment, there's love. Next moment, there's love, right? And that's it. You're not asking, there's no, I want something out of the fruit of the action, right?
Right.
Offer up the action to divinity. That's what makes the universe elevated and sublime, is what Eckhart says in his talk on the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Karma Yoga is about so totally and completely present in this present moment that we offer our action as a selfless sacrifice, right? And in the offering, renouncing the fruit of action, and in that selfless sacrifice, is what makes the universe elevated and sublime. Just imagine if 7 billion human beings offered their action in that selfless sacrifice, so totally and completely present that they didn't ask for anything more. I just want to be here with Eileen and Louise and everyone else that's on the Facebook group posting. And that's all I want for right now. This moment, what I want is this moment,
Right.
right? And nothing more.
Yeah, that's complete presence. And you were here now. That's all that's important.
The only word that I would add is gratitude, because I think that that's part of why there's kind of no more wanting, at least for me, is that I'm
Yes,
grateful for what's right here at this present moment. And then you don't have that wanting or desire.
exactly. Totally agree.
Thank you for that wisdom, Eileen. That's appreciation of this present moment, right? So totally and completely present that you appreciate, there's appreciation flowing into this present moment.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's all there is. There's nothing more. The next moment doesn't exist, and the past moment is gone already.
Mhm.
It doesn't exist. I hope we answered Sujata's indifference and thwarted wanting very well.
Yes, I hope
I
so
think
too.
I think so. And I'm grateful for her too. She's actually translating for, like, she's typing summaries of our conversations so that Christina can translate.
Oh,
I know
Google
she usually,
Translate. Oh, so
so
sweet.
I
So
asked her if
precious.
somebody else could do it because there's a delay in the video, and she stepped up and she offered to do it. So that's really
So
sweet. I'm very grateful
precious.
for that.
We have such beautiful souls in this
mhm.
group. And I think that is what the strength of the group is. We have a core group of very they anchor the group in presence, because I see other Facebook groups and there's a lot of chitter chatter in the group, right? Our
Mhm.
group says very little. They are people that have mind energy, but most of the group holds a good amount of presence,
Mhm.
and that is very humbling. And on the days that I think, oh my God, why am I doing this admin work, that is the rewarding part, that the humility in seeing that they are actually holding their presence. So thank you, Sujata. That's incredible. Thank you for helping. We don't have any more questions, Eileen. Okay, so we talk about your book in between questions. If Eileen
Yeah.
posts something, then uh, we'll read the question and answer the question, kind of. So what all work have you, once you publish the book, then is there, like, you do online sessions or working sessions or something with people, or have you been able to form a group of mothers?
Well, the book only got published last month, so
Okay, so
it
it's been,
hasn't been a long time. And what I've done is I created a newsletter, and that's kind of my way of staying connected with people, and like discussing more on the topics in the book, like surrender and forgiveness, and so kind of a continuing conversation. And then as far as I've done some guest speaking on some support groups that are like grandparents raising grandchildren, or there's another one that I did for parents of adult addicts. And there's like adoption support groups. So there's a lot of support groups out there that, and it's kind of like this, like being on Zoom and talking about how I found peace, basically, and the topics in the book. But I think that what I've noticed is that when you write a book, it's very slow. Like, you it doesn't happen like how you would think in your mind, like I write a book and it's over with. It's like it's actually more work after you write the book, and it's very like slow, because you're building relationships as you go along, so that takes time.
I'm hoping you're able to support members here too on the Facebook group if they are uh, like foster parents or
Yeah,
other
of course.
parents, right? Like,
Yeah, of course. Like, I would love for anybody in the group who is in this situation or similar situation, and we can. My book is actually, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a pen name, so it's Tabitha Sage. So they can join my Facebook group under Tabitha Sage, or I'm on Instagram, Tabitha Sage, and or reach out to me, in private messenger, and there, if there's anything I can do to help or connect them. In this last newsletter that I did, I listed 4 support groups. One is out of the East Coast, and they meet on Monday nights. And then there's one here in Colorado that meets in the day on Wednesdays. And then the one group that the first one that I did a guest speaking, it's called Hurting Moms, Mending Hearts. And it's Christian based, and it's for 10 weeks. And they give you a little booklet. And I went through it for the 10 weeks. And then I did the guest speaking. And that brings a lot of parents that are struggling with their adult child. It brings them together. And then she also does like a weekly live kind of like this, where she has like a guest speaker and talks more on the topics. So there's a lot of really good resources out there. And so, anybody who would like to reach out, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you, Louise. And so one of the things you were saying was initially you were feeling, what could I have done different, right? Which you could not have done anything different, because every human acts, what Eckhart says, they are at a certain level of consciousness. And as long as we were at that state of consciousness, we acted out the conditioned pattern of what we were in that moment. It's only when we make a shift that we can be. So how does that play with when you're talking to these workshops? Are there not parents that think, oh, I'm my guilt ridden and shame? Then I'll talk about guilt, and then I'll talk about shame. So let's talk about guilt first. Isn't there guilt?
Oh yeah.
Are they not affected by guilt? I'm not saying about you, because you've done Eckhart's work, right? But
Right.
I'm thinking that a parent that has a child that is in addiction, right? That they may have guilt of, what did I do in the past?
Yes, that's probably the number
Let's
one
speak
thing.
about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah. And not only well, first of all, being a parent, you already feel that, you feel such responsibility for your child. So when anything goes wrong, you right away think it's you or something you did or said or whatever. So it's already kind of conditioned in us to be that way. But and so I would say, and then you have the adult child telling you things, because drugs and alcohol change the brain. And so they're not talking like in their right mind. So they will often, and I would probably say 99% of the time, will blame the parent, during these rages or whatever, drug-induced things. Is it's your fault, you should have done this, if you and dad wouldn't have got a divorce, if this wouldn't have happened, if that wouldn't have happened. So there's a lot of guilt. That's a big, huge thing. And one thing that really, really helped me with that was a book that I read. I can't even think of the author's name, but he is actually the president, I believe, of Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. And, it gave me a perspective of like seeing it from the other side. And he like explained that, his parents are actually like the founders of PBS. He was raised, went to a very prestigious college. He had got a job as a journalist for CNN. He lived in a really beautiful home on Long Island, had a wife and 3 kids. And one night when he got off work, he said he saw some guys standing on the corner, and they asked, do you want to buy some meth? And he just said yes. And he doesn't know if he just was like, when sometimes people feel like they deserve a drink after a hard work or whatever. And he kind of like equated it to that. Like maybe he just felt like he needed to relax, and he spiraled and just, and it was just an example of, no matter what kind of parenting you have, what kind of upbringing, if you're privileged, if whatever, drugs do not discriminate. And so you can't blame yourself for someone else's actions. And the other part to it too is, it's a decision that an adult child, they're adults, they're over 18, they make, that decision. And just like I make decisions, and I can't blame somebody else for my decisions, and so you have to like come around to seeing the full circle of it and understanding that, along with addiction comes other issues too, like there's mental health involved, there's the refusal to want to face life or grow up, or there's a lot of other little things that are intertwined in there. And so what it boils down to is that it's nobody's fault, really. It's, everybody makes their own decisions, and we all do the best we can with what we have at that given time. And so, I feel like, in my own self, I feel like I have a clear conscience. Like I know, like I worked really hard. Was a stay-at-home mom. My husband had to work overtime so I could stay at home. I worked like every day. I was like, today we're going to cook, tomorrow's park day, today's art day, today's music day. I was very active, and, I was involved in their sports and Girl Scouts and all this other stuff. So, but a lot of parents can't say that. A lot of parents will say, well, I was working all the time, I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. But either way, it doesn't really matter, because it's a decision that person makes. And so that's how I feel about it.
And what Eckhart would say, if they were to accept Eckhart's teachings, he would just say, guilt is ego's favorite strategy to strengthen itself. So the more we feel, the more the movie starts, right? The story making mind of guilt. Oh, I did this, and I drank 2 glasses of wine instead of taking care of my child, and she went saw this bad movie, or whatever the story is saying. Drop it, right? So constantly, and that's why the presence practice, and I welcome everyone to the group meditation. That's why presence practice, because the more the presence power develops, then you're able to see the content of your thought. And if that content is telling you something about guilt, right? Drop it. Drop it, like in The Power of Now, he says, drop it like a hot potato, right? Samara is saying something. One time I simply sat and then took a nap when a friend was worried about her breast cancer. She said just having someone with her made her feel better. No talking, just being present with her. I never forgot that lesson. So it's more a statement that giving spaciousness, even though the friend was saying that she had breast cancer, she didn't feed into her friend's worry, right? So it's more of a statement. That's awesome, Samar. Yeah, that's all that is needed, right? That we offer spaciousness, the togetherness, the bond, and that's why human beings are Homo sapiens, or whatever ape-like creatures, and then we became Homo sapiens. We are all bonding kind of creatures, right? You see the gorilla hold its baby and like carrying its baby. That's just bonding. We're bonding kind of creatures. So that's all that the friend needed. So, you wouldn't be able to tell the mothers, just drop it, drop the content of your thought is guilt and drop it,
I mean,
right?
I have said that to some people. I guess it's just, you kind of figure out, I don't know, I think you really get this too, is that you get led to say what that person needs to hear. And so, I think there's been times where I've said that, where I felt like that person could, hear it. But like a lot of times, like you said, we're all in different spots and stages, or, so I just feel like whatever comes out is meant to come out. So whenever, like, when the first guest speaking thing I did, we got together right before we went on live, and she goes, I don't like to script anything, and I said, yeah, neither do I. I'd like to just let it, whatever comes out, and then we went on live and everything. And then afterwards we talked, and she said, I just felt like whatever came out was right for this audience. And we never know what the audience is going to be, or, who exactly we're speaking to. So I think people will hear, the message if they're ready.
Thank you for that. So, leading from guilt would be shame, right? So we are in the suburbs, or it's like a middle class family, right? So the general what I've learned from Eckhart, Louise, is there are certain conditioned patterns that are from the culture that we are in, right? The environment we are in, the society that we are in. And the condition pattern would be that they see, or parents derive a sense of self-esteem from how well this child is doing. So especially in Texas, right? So my son is 22 now. So he's played baseball, and I've seen these parents get so angry, and he's played baseball since he was 5, right? So they're yelling and screaming at a 5-year-old, yelling and screaming at every mistake that the child makes, right? They're yelling and screaming. And Texas is a very sports-like state. If anybody does not understand, I'm just giving, some people may know already that it's all about the football, the baseball, I mean, now basketball and soccer is picking up, but it's primarily driven towards building children that will be football players. That's why it's called a football factory, right? UT Austin is called a football factory. LSU is called a football factory. Alabama is called a football factory because they churn football players, right? That's their business. So I've seen that thing that where parents derive their sense of self-esteem from their child, right? And if the child is not doing well, God forbid the child is not doing well, right? Like, I have a lot of friends, and the stereotypical thing about South Asian people is that the child will be a lawyer or a doctor or brilliant, right? And I think even people of Chinese origin, there's a stereotype where you say that person is going to be brilliant, like they're going to be, and God forbid your daughter or son is into music or arts or something way off from that path, right? So the parent is left with, it almost is like the child is teaching the parent. I almost feel this, right? That what Eckhart says, and we remove that identity by not playing that role of a parent. it's like it's telling that parent, get rid of that self-esteem, get rid of that ego identity from your child. Don't derive your sense of, I see that whenever I hear somebody complaining about their child not doing well, right? I always the thought comes to my mind, oh, this parent is deriving their sense of self-esteem from their child, right? They just, the child is, and then if it's a grown up child, I've had coworkers where the grown up children have left, right? They may be living with their parent and then said, I don't want anything to do with you, and left. And then this mother is like falling apart because the grown up child left. And I'm like, she's just telling you that get rid of your role, mothering role, right? Know that you are no longer a mother. She's a grown adult. She's going to find her spiritual path and she's going to evolve, right? She's saying that. That soul is saying, I'm going to separate, right? So, what do you think of that? The driving the sense of self esteem. Now your child is an addict.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Uh, I think maybe because of the culture, I'm Hispanic, and because I didn't feel that as much because we are such a large family and we have every color, every career, everything you could think of. So it wasn't, the shame that I felt was for my daughter. Like, I just felt like I felt that she was feeling ashamed of herself. And I also felt the shame of her not loving herself enough. But I think a lot of it is because of where I was raised around and the people, my culture. But, there's a lot of people in my support groups that they never have even talked to their best friends about it. Like, they won't even say, my son's on drugs, or, my son is in jail, or, because of drugs or whatever. And so there's a lot of people, they are, embarrassed or feeling that shame, and they won't even talk about it. And sometimes in the support groups that I belong to, it's actually the very first time when we'll go around the room and everybody kind of tells their story. And there's been so many times I can't even tell you where it's been the very first time that someone's even talked about it. So there's a lot of shame involved, but I think it is tied to culture and, how you were raised.
And that people are saying you're a good parent or a bad parent depending on how well your child is doing.
Right. And, I'll see a lot of quotes on Facebook that will say stuff like that, like, your children are a result of your parenting, or you should, have your children respect you because they're going to end up on drugs, or, those type of things. And it's just not true. It's just another one of those stories that we feed ourselves, and that keeps us off our path of being grounded, because a lot of that stuff is just conditioning and the way people, think. Like, if you don't graduate from high school and go to college and get married and buy a house and have a child, then something's wrong. And people judge and they assume, and, and I think that's one of the biggest things about being present is you learn to not assume, not judge. You just are so into that moment that all of those things, again, just go away. They're not issues or problems. But I think, it's a very tough role when you're a parent. And I think I mentioned this last week, how we're, from the day that our child's born, it's like our baby, we need to protect our baby. We need to hold our baby tight. We need to give them every opportunity. We need to do this. So we, from the get-go, take on that responsibility, but things change and evolve. And as they grow, you let go more and more and more and more. And then once they're adults, you know, like, I don't want to interfere in my adult children's paths. Like, you know, I don't want to control their lives. Like, I want them to live their lives the way they were intended to live. And it's not a desire of mine, but I think for many parents it is. I think, you know, I have a lot of friends who are very disappointed if their child doesn't go to college, or they'll even stop talking to their child if they, you know, get in some kind of trouble or whatever. So, you know, this being a parent has so many layers, and there's so many, it's a balancing act, really.
You know, Byron Katie's daughter was an alcoholic,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she says that with her awakening, she would sit in an armchair waiting for her daughter. Like her daughter would take the car, and Byron Katie did not, like when the daughter picked up the car keys and drove, Byron Katie did not know if the daughter would come back alive. Like every day it was, she says something in, I don't know if it's in Thousand Names for Joy or Loving What Is, out of the two books. She says, woman sitting in a chair, just sitting in a chair, waiting for her daughter, right? I think she sat and waited for her daughter to come back every night.
And
That's
that's,
how she was. And she let her daughter go, right? Go be an alcoholic, whatever she was, she left. And within 5-6 years, I think her daughter realized that uh, Byron Katie had a way, you know, the work, whatever she calls the work, that she would come back. And so she went through rehab and came back and started doing the work with Byron Katie. So it really transformed her. So I think the same thing happened to her sons too. They came back. But she says that's the letting go, let go of them kind of thing.
yeah. And I think that's also another thing with a lot of parents that have this issue, is that you do go on some kind of wait. Like, you know, I remember feeling that way, like just waiting, like for something to happen. I don't know what, you know, I just wanted something to happen to make things go back to, you know, normal again. And that's an issue with a lot of parents, you know, in my support groups too. And one thing that I always say is that, you know, we can't wait for somebody to rescue us or to take care of us, or, you know, it's our responsibility, and we need to be our own advocates.
And the part to recognize is addiction is not a affliction, right? It's not a it may be that they are addicted to a drug, but they could also be addicted to eating. They could be addicted to their work. Workaholism is not even recognized as an addiction, but a lot of people, if you're spending 18 hours a day working, you're a workaholic. 6 to 8 hours is the max, and that too 6 to 8 hours of relaxed work where you're taking breaks. That is enough work. If you have started to, so you're building your identity as, oh, I work 18 hours a day, I have 4 hours of sleep, I work the weekend, I have not a minute to, that is an addiction as well. And that is something that Eckhart calls dense karmic accumulation, or the past conditioned behavior, right?
Yeah.
We are already born with a compulsion, and we've talked about it during group meditation. It's called, whether you call it karma, but there is a compulsion in the human being. So when you were talking about the guy, so compulsion is a vibrational energy, right? So the fact that he had never had drugs, but his hand moved towards this guy to get that drug, that implies that vibrationally he was holding the compulsion. Maybe he was a workaholic, maybe he was, the compulsion was moving in some other direction. And now here came that compulsion, law of attraction, right?
Mhm.
Vibrationally, you had a compulsion. You were not recognizing the compulsion. Now comes a substance. So one thing we need to look at is generationally, do we have some kind of compulsion in the family, right? They could be alcoholism in the family. They could be physical abuse,
Mhm.
right? Could be berating, emotional abuse, could be a compulsion, right? Generationally, great grandparents to parents to, they're just berating, berating, berating. And the next generation is, you know, the other humbling, very humbling experience about the group meditation is the group that meditates together, that they are actually trying to break away from the generational patterns. They're beginning to recognize, like the group meditators are actually beginning to, the attendees are beginning to recognize their patterns in their families, right?
Mhm.
That, oh, I had an alcoholic, I mean, the family had alcohol addiction. So of course my child is going to have alcohol addiction. Why will she or he not have alcohol addiction, right? Or some kind of, now it's video gaming is an addiction, right?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Being addicted to your phone, your social media status is an addiction. So that pause, that conscious breath that Eckhart says, the pause, stop, look at a tree, look at the sky throughout the day. How do you introduce the periods of gaps in your day, Eileen, in your 12, 14-hour day?
Thankfully, the 14-hour days are over for right now. For a couple months, 2 months. I've been trying to do the 3 conscious breaths that we've talked about a couple of times at group meditation. When I find like I can't find time for something, but it's like needed, I find that that helps kind of recenter me. I do daily meditation, morning meditations, and daily nighttime meditation. So I do those, but in between, I do the 3 conscious breaths. I tried the inner body awareness. I'm just not very good at that yet.
It'll come.
Tried that.
As
It'll
you
come.
keep practicing, it'll come.
It'll come.
It's a natural state of increasing. I'm sure
Mhm.
you do feel certain energy by now because you've been doing it since last year, some energy in
About
your
my
body.
hands.
Yeah.
That's about
Been,
it. My fingers, basically.
yeah.
But I have gotten it more than that. I just not typically get
Do
there.
you want to come back next week again, Louise, or how are you with the schedules?
Yeah, I can come back next week. Are we out of time?
I mean, we can spend a few minutes, but we are at
Oh,
the hour, like it's
yeah.
10 past
Yeah.
the top of the hour. Anything else that you wanted to share? Any wisdom about? So we talked about guilt, shame, and blame. Let's talk about blame. You said
Okay.
your daughter was, so that's another way of the ego strengthening itself, right?
Mm,
It's easy to say, hey, my parents did it, or my school did it, or somebody touched me at school and now I have a traumatic experience.
mhm,
Blaming something outside, external from us, and the ego strengthens itself. So drop in the content of your thought. And that's so important, right? To be the presence and be able to see the content and
mhm,
how it's creating a low frequency vibration in the form of blame. Now I want to vomit out blame on everybody and anybody, right? Even the storekeeper, how they put their groceries, arrange their groceries. Now I'm going to blame them, right? Blame them for making me wait. Blame them for the guy didn't wipe my car properly when the thing went through the car wash, right?
yeah. And it's sad when you see like grown adults doing that. You know, that's like something that I'm constantly teaching the children, because even today, earlier, the 9-year-old said, I'm so angry, I'm so mad, I hate Olivia. And I said, okay, let's talk about this. And I said, why are you feeling this way? And he goes, because I was running and I tripped and I fell and it's all her fault. And so, we dissected it and everything and talked about it. But as I was going through it, it just reminded me of like so many grown adults that you see out there that, they never learn to take responsibility for themselves. And it's always, like the parents' fault, the way I was raised, how my husband treated me, how my kids treated me, my job. And when we do all of that, we miss out on what we could be learning and moving towards and growing, because you can't blame other people for things in your life. You've got to it might have caused something to happen, but ultimately it was your decision to take it from that point, on. And so, that's kind of one of my biggest goals with the kids right now, is to teach that, to look at their own responsibility and to realize that no one's responsible for your own actions.
Just look at that they're just 7, 8, 9, and
know.
they already know the pattern, right?
Yeah.
So the pattern is in the collective. And somebody, Peggy was saying somewhere that ego is personal, and I responded, no, there's a collective energy pattern out there, right? And you just download that pattern. Like, you just have to be a 1-year-old baby. And I see some 1-year-old babies with that angry face, and I look at it and I go, so they've already learned how to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Some of them have smiling faces, but then they've already learned how to be angry. The other very poignant pointer that Eckhart pointed out was when parents, you remember I was talking about the lollipop, when parents, the child is crying and you give the child lollipop, right? You're training the child, then the adult learns that being unhappy buys me something.
Or all I have to do is cry or throw a fit, and then I get what I want.
So don't ever, once you say no, and especially if you have little children, if you say no to your child, stick with it. Even if they're throwing a tantrum, let them throw a tantrum. And I had done a parenting class, actually CPS. One of my coworkers' wife was teaching a CPS parenting class, and he sent me along with all the shackled people that were actually bad parents. He made me go to his wife's class. And in there, they say that if you took them to the grocery store and they were throwing a tantrum, just leave your groceries right there and pick them up and bring them home. And the next time you're going to the grocery store, say, hey, so-and-so, I'm not going to take you to the grocery store. Do you remember what happened the last time you were there? You had a tantrum, right? So be ready in every grocery store trip that your child, one, make sure they're fed, two,
Right.
that they've had enough sleep, and then take them to the grocery store. But in spite of that, if the tantrum happens, then be ready to leave your groceries. So a lot of parents feed train their children to be unhappy adults, actually, not realizing that. Beautiful, beautiful lessons for parenting, right, Eileen? Thank you, Louise. We are so filled with gratitude. Like, we had a wonderful flow of conversation.
Yes, it was great.
A lot of parenting tips. So next week, Kelly from the group may be able to attend. So we'll have Louise and Kelly as guests, and Eileen will be here.
That'll be
her
wonderful.
Wisdom. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Thank
Have
you.
a fantastic
Thank you,
day.
everyone.
Thank you.
Honor and a privilege that everyone